The April 18th, 2022 regular meeting of the Cinnaminson Township Committee is now called to order. Everyone please rise and join me in saluting the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, C-231. Notice of this meeting was published in the Burlington County Times and Courier Post on January 7th, 2022. Roll call, Madam Secretary, please.
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Conda?
Present.
Mr. Horner?
Here.
Mr. Seagrass is absent. Deputy Mayor Mcgill?
Here.
Mayor Crable?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We'll roll into committee liaison reports. We will start with Committee Member Conda, Administration and Health and Senior Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All I have this evening is just a couple of reminders. Every once in a while, I like to remind everybody that the website for Cinnaminson is full of great information. Particularly this week is the April newsletter was published, so if anyone wants to take a look and see what's going on in Cinnaminson, go right to the website, take a look at the new newsletter, and that is all I have this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Conda. Committee Member Horner, Finance and Economic Development.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have nothing new to report this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horner. Committeeman Seagrist isn't here, so we will move on to Deputy Mayor Mcgill, Public Safety.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Short and sweet tonight. Total incidents responded to was 3,017. Total arrests made were 28. Total motor vehicle stops is 514. Total motor vehicle summonses was 298. And total DWI arrests was 8. And that is all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. For myself, I have Parks and Recreation and Veterans Affairs. For Veterans Affairs, the Township is making plans for a Memorial Day ceremony, tentatively being held on Friday, May 27th here at Town Hall. Event times and specific program information will be available in the coming weeks. That concludes my report. We are moving on to Budget Introduction, Resolution 2022-69. 2022 municipal budget to be advertised in the Burlington County Times. Public hearing is scheduled for May 16th, 2022. May I have a motion to introduce Resolution 2022-69?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to introduce Resolution 2022-69, please.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. May I have a second?
Madam Mayor, I will second that.
Thank you, Mr. Conda. Roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Conda?
Aye.
Mr. Horner?
Aye.
Mr. Mcgill?
Aye.
Mayor Crable?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we have an ordinance introduction, Ordinance 2022-6, authorizing capital improvements appropriating $1,785,000, authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in the aggregate principal amount of up to $1,695,750 to be advertised in the Burlington County Times. Public hearing is scheduled for May 16th, 2022. May I have a motion to ordinance 2022-6?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to introduce ordinance 2022-6.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Conda?
Aye.
Mr. Horner?
Aye.
Mr. Mcgill?
Aye.
Mayor Crable?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2022-7. 2022 salary ordinance to be advertised in the Burlington County Times. Public hearing is scheduled for May 16th, 2022. May I have a motion to introduce ordinance 2022-7?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to introduce ordinance 2022-7.
I will second the motion. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Conda?
Aye.
Mr. Horner?
Aye.
Mr. Mcgill?
Aye.
Mayor Crable?
Aye.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2022-2, amending, revising, supplementing, and/or repealing Chapter 140 of the General Code of the Township of Cinnaminson entitled Abandoned Property List, Chapter 193 of the Code entitled Buildings, Vacant, and Chapter 265 of the Code entitled Fees. Mr. Minton, can you please give us some detail on this ordinance?
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, members of committee, members of the public. The first of a series of ordinances tonight, 2022-2, sets forth a abandoned property registry. It's really a model ordinance that came out of rules and regulations promulgated by the state. And it's something that we had been considering for 2 years to take the existing abandoned properties and to make sure they conform in some type of way of closeout, as well as to create a record and a registry so that we know exactly who the property owners, property maintenance owners are, as well as the opportunity to repurpose and redevelop them. Sometimes Mr. Shoebaker and I will spend weeks trying to track down the rightful owner. But more importantly, it was really to set forth the maintenance. So for example, when we close a building, let's pick a gas station. And right now we see the condition is they may just paint over the name of the sign. Well, that's really not in keeping with the streetscape we've tried to develop along 130. We may have a building, as in the old Acme, that just has plywood on top to secure the building. But this ordinance will allow us to say, no, you need to paint that out to match the facade so it blends in. It does those things, and like most ordinances, it sets forth registration fees as well as penalties for violations. Madam Mayor, that's the ordinance for your consideration in public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minton. May I have a motion to open public comment on ordinance 2022-2?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to open public comment on ordinance 2022-2.
Okay, I will second. Voice vote. Ayes.
Aye.
Nays. Abstentions. Ayes have it. Public comment on ordinance 2022-2 is now open. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, my name is Jamala Shepherd, 215 West Front Street, Palmyra, New Jersey, 08065. I am the president of the Civic Club in East Riverton, and I have a few questions that they would like me to ask. For the ordinance, the example that was given was for commercial. What about just in the residential area? How does it work for a residential area? What do you do? Do you come out, look at the property, see how long it's been not upkept or who the owner is? How does that work exactly? And how long does it take? And are neighbors notified when you do it?
Would you like me to-
Yes, please, Mr. Platt, please.
Good evening, Ms. Shepherd. The ordinance applies to both residential and commercial properties. If a property is in foreclosure, meaning that a bank or some other lender has foreclosed upon it, that property will be required to pay a fee and register. If the property is in foreclosure and vacant, there's a different fee, again, still registration. I'm just giving you a chance to write your notes down.
Please take your time.
Okay.
Then if a property is just vacant but not in foreclosure, they still have to register, and there's no fee for that. However, for all properties, residential or commercial, foreclosed and/or vacant, they have to meet these requirements for business and/or residential closure of a home. So depending upon the circumstances, but primarily the comments were made by Mr. Minton had to do with commercial properties for the streetscape piece of it, but houses as well. And these fees will be used, or help to be used to pay to help with the closure if those property owners abandon their obligations under the ordinance. And there's all kinds of fines and penalties for them not complying with the ordinance. And this ordinance is modeled after a state statute that was passed late last year, early this year, in this legislative session that just passed in January, that allows for this kind of an ordinance to be in place in municipalities.
Okay, so previously, what we had was basically nothing but the paying over, as he stated?
No, we previously had an ordinance similar to this, but it was not the ordinance that was authorized by state statute. So this ordinance has enhanced what we had before, but we did have something to this effect, yes.
Okay, an example. If there's a property in a residential section, and you're coming out to say, there's nothing you could do but everything that was done to find the owner, you couldn't find the owner, et cetera, and the house has to be knocked down, or the property has to be seized or whatever, and it was in a residential section. If that residential section only had one home on that lot, could someone get a variance and put 2 homes on that lot?
Now you're asking me a different question.
Yes, okay, should I wait till later?
So we're just, yeah, there's a general public portion, but if you want to stick to this ordinance, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, so I should come back later and answer that question?
Yeah, we have a general public portion at the end, so
Okay.
we'll be happy to answer your questions then.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Seeing no one else come forward, may I have a motion to close public comment on ordinance 2022-2?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to close public comments on ordinance 2022-2.
Okay, I'll second. Voice vote, please. Ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Ayes have it. May I have a motion to approve ordinance 2022-2?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-2.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. May I have a second?
Madam Mayor, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Conda.
Aye.
Mr. Horner.
Aye.
Mr. Mcgill.
Aye.
Mayor Craybill.
Aye.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2022-3, amending, revising, and supplementing Chapter 330, Article 2 of the General Code of the Township of Cinnaminson entitled Site Plans. Mr. Minton, can you give us some information on this ordinance?
Yes, Mayor. The action before you tonight modifies our existing site plan filing and requirements. It fundamentally does 2 factors. One, it streamlines the process in which a waiver is granted when a site plan is not required. And we've been very successful. We've seen very minor improvements from time to time where it doesn't affect parking, it doesn't affect drainage. It's been a change in ownership, and we've been able to streamline that process. The planning board just most recently dealt with Andy Hirsch's building, the building that sits between the car wash and the Wawa. There was, to a large expense, the new owners had to come in and make formal application to the planning board. This would have alleviated that had this ordinance been in place and streamlined that. Second thing it does, it sets up, and we've never had this before, an informal review by the planning board. We've had, Mr. Schuberger and I have been dealing with a developer on 130, and it's a little bit like the chicken and the egg. He'll say, well, what would you like us to do there? And we don't have a process by which he could appear in front of the planning board. It sets up that administrative process as well. So that's the ordinance for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Minton. May I have a motion to open public comment for ordinance 2022-3?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to open public comment on ordinance 2022-3.
Thank you. I will second. Voice vote. Ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Ayes have it. Public comment on ordinance 2022-3 is now open. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing no one come forward, may I have a motion to close public comment on ordinance 2022-3?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to close public comment on ordinance 2022-3.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. I will second. Voice vote. Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Ayes have it. May I have a motion to approve ordinance 2022-3?
Madam Mayor, I will make a motion to adopt ordinance 2022-3.
Thank you, Mr. Conda. May I have a second?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Mayor. Mr. Conda.
Aye.
Mr. Horner.
Aye.
Mr. Mcgill.
Aye.
Mayor Craybill.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Ordinance 2022-4, amending, revising, and supplementing Chapter 525 of the General Code of the Township of Cinnaminson entitled Zoning. Mr. Minton, can I get you again to give us a little bit
Of
more
course,
detail?
Mayor, you pay me by the hour, it's not a problem. Mayor and committee and the public, for your consideration this evening is ordinance 22-4, an ordinance amending zoning requirements, particularly in the residential zone. We realized some 2 years ago, perhaps, that we had a hole in our ordinance, and we did not properly identify where cemeteries and related structures could be placed in town. Is it a commercial use, is it industrial use? After consultation with the planners, it was deemed the most appropriate zoning section would be residential uses. As mayor, I know you're aware, we have 4 separate cemeteries in town. Some, Lakeview is a very large facility, and we have a few pocket cemeteries as well. And this ordinance attempts to create the bulk standards to properly plan for and allow across all 4 cemeteries, excuse me. It provides conditional uses as in structures, parking, design standards, mausoleums, chapels, other supporting things, and sets forth the minimum acreage requirement of 25 acres so that we can begin to consolidate these. And that's the action before you tonight. I'm sure there'll be some public comments. I've had some individual conversations. In drafting this ordinance, there was nothing nefarious. It was really to make sure that we exercised our best practices and applied for this use in what we deem to be the appropriate zone, and is modeled after other state ordinances in South Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Minton. May I have a motion to open public comment on ordinance 2022-4?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to open public comment on ordinance 2022-3? 4, sorry, 4.
I will second. Voice vote. Ayes.
Aye.
Nays. Abstentions. Ayes have it. Public comment on ordinance 2022-4 is now open. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
They're coming strong tonight.
Here comes what?
They're coming in strong tonight.
Yeah. I did suggest a couple edits.
Mr. Goins, can I get your name and address? Sorry.
Mike Goins, 100 Pennell Ave. So I did suggest a couple edits to the ordinance, and it's really to address Morgan Cemetery. I mean, it is littered with all kinds of trash over there. And today, I think it was today, I sent you our Lakeviews. And a lot of what I put in there is also in Lakeview. But I would like to see, that addressed in this ordinance, that, they can't use balloons, they can't release balloons. The litter all there, and all that ends up in the MS4, the storm drain, which goes out into the Pennsauken, which then goes out into Delaware. And if you go walk that, that's all it is litter. Little stuffed animals, balloons, paper. It's bad. And also, I think they should have gates that are locked there, because we've called the neighbors plenty of times late at night because kids are in there or people are blasting their music late at night. During the daytimes, they have picnics in there with the whole families for hours on end, blasting music. So I would like to see that addressed. And then also, I know this goes on throughout the town with the releasing of doves, and all they are is hawk bait or whatever, because most of them are not true homing pigeons, so they don't fend for themselves, so they end up getting killed. So that was another part of the ordinance that I suggested, that for these cemeteries not to be allowed to do that anymore. So is that possible? Or is it something you looked at prior?
Yes, so thanks for, going through the comments again, but we did take a look at them. So we wanted to listen to all the comments tonight because we did get a few
Okay.
calls about it and then take it all in. I think that's what we're doing for now,
Okay,
but we appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goins.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ben Young, 116 Woodview Lane, but I'm also here as a trustee of the Lakeview Cemetery. And I've spoken with Mr. Schubiger about this when I saw the ordinance published. And while I'm not subscribing to what Mr. Coynes is talking about because I don't think we have those issues in Lakeview. We have a number of other issues. And in reality, this ordinance is not aligned to dealing with something like Morgan as he's talking about. We're talking about 25-acre minimums. There are four cemeteries in Cinnaminson. Mike is right. That's correct. But only one of them even comes close to 25 acres. I think that maybe Morgan might be 10 or 12 acres, so it's less than half that size. So this really is an ordinance that fits around Lakeview. And I don't think we've been bad neighbors. We don't have a lot of complaints. I mean, to our knowledge anyway, we've had a couple noise complaints when we were building the addition to the mausoleum. So I'm not quite sure, other than we're filling in a hole, as it was mentioned, to the purpose of adopting this. Because this ordinance presents a whole host of problems for Lakeview. And I'll kind of touch on them. Number 2, which is your 3A page, I guess it's on page 2, your section 3A2. No more than 10% of the entire area or a maximum of 5 acres may be devoted to above-ground buildings. Since we're the only cemetery that exceeds 25 acres, this would only apply to us. We have approximately 80 acres total in the cemetery. There's no more land in Cinnaminson of any consequence that could be designated for cemetery use. So it appears that this kind of specifically is set up for Lakeview. The next one that I have a comment about is the 20-foot buffer strip shall be provided between a building or burial site and the cemetery property line. That's your 3A4. Our current facilities, all in, cover currently about 2 acres. We have an overall development design that would cover more than 5 acres without including our support facilities or our maintenance sheds, or the MOL, which is the mausoleum by the lakes. So we see this 5-acre limit being a long-term issue because, after all, as land is not available anymore, and as we're selling out our graves, the only place you can really do anything is up. And that's, of course, some of the planning that we've done long-term. The 20-foot buffer strip, currently, our maintenance shed is within 15 foot of the property line. It's been there probably 50 years. We have graves sold and occupied around the property that are all within less than 20 foot of the property line. So every one of those would put us into a non-conforming situation. Along the Route 130 highway, we used to be further back, but more recently, and when I say more recently, probably 20 years ago, when the state realigned Route 130 up in that area for the bridge, their property line is way up on our property. The property for Route 130 is probably 40 feet or 50 feet from our property line. We're set back. So again, but we're right to the property line is where our graves are. That's the case on Route 130, the case on the Asbury Church side. It's the case on the Magnolia Court and Mainline Shopping Center side. The only one it really doesn't apply to at the moment would be Willow Drive, because that has a gas service that runs down there and a road that kind of kicks us to the other side of the property line and away from the property line. We're a garden cemetery, so we certainly can't be offending people by what they look out the back window and see, because it's a garden cemetery. There are no monuments. Everything is on level with the ground. So I don't think we're hurting anybody's situation in that respect. The next one is 3B1. The maximum height of mausoleums, columbariums, or other burial structures shall be 15 feet. Again, we're already in a non-conforming use, because our buildings are already 25 to 27 feet. Our crypts alone inside the building are 17 and a half foot above the ground. So that, again, would be a very severe hardship and not the best use of property long-term, because you mentioned just below that you permit 35 foot in a residential zone. You permit 35 foot for our accessory buildings. So what would be the problem with having 35 foot for the columbariums? Let's see. There's a comment in there about entrance setbacks, and I can't speak to that because I think, again, our entrances are affected because of where the state right-of-way falls, regardless of where the road is. 3C1. Accessory buildings other than chapels, there should be no less than one space for each 200-foot of floor area. Well, to give you an example of the situation with that, which for a couple of reasons. The current facilities we have are 22,000 feet total. Those 22,000 feet of floor area, actually in usable corridors, because the rest are crypts or niches, so there's no activity on them other than horizontal, would be 110 spaces versus if you took the 2,280 actual aisles and walking spaces, would put us down to about 12 spaces. So you can see there's a tremendous differential in that requirement. There's no doubt that we have large funeral processions for some of our burials and entombments. However, we have a great deal of internal roadways that they use for parking when they come there, so it does not affect the traveling public in any way, shape, or form. And they can easily, when they line up on one side, cars can get past them. As an example, just yesterday, we had our 90th Easter sunrise service. We had about 500 attendees, and we had cars everywhere, but not a car on the street or bothering anybody off the site. So it was certainly, certainly not creating a hardship or a hazard on the highway. In closing, I'd like to say this. There's an overall hardship attached to becoming a non-conforming use, as you well know. It requires legal notice for literally every land use or permitted activity that we would be doing, which entails approximately notifying 75 property owners every time we wanted to do something. And since you all have participated in planning board or things like that, you know the cost of sending out legal notices on top of advertising. So there's a basic hardship just in trying to do anything if this ordinance were adopted. I had suggested to Mr. Schubiger when I spoke to him that I would ask you to table it and take it, and we'll be glad to meet with you and present our concerns and try to work out some details to make this a more palatable ordinance, particularly since we're the only ones affected by it. So it would make sense to talk it through, but you would have to table it tonight, and that's what I had suggested that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Mayor, I just want to address a couple of comments. It's going to be up for, obviously, Mayor and committee to decide if you're going to take those comments and evaluate them. I do want to make sure that the committee, which I know you're aware of this, but just to reassure committee and for the public to understand that when there's an ordinance change like this, it doesn't create non-conformities to existing structures. So anything that's out there already does not require them to get some sort of approval that would require variances. This will only be for new development at the cemetery. So I don't want people left with the impression, it's the way any zoning ordinance works, that it creates a variance on existing facilities or existing buildings. That's not to say Mr. Young doesn't have other comments you may want to take into consideration, but it's not retroactive. Thank you.
So he'd be grandfathered. A lot of that stuff would be grandfathered in, basically.
For whatever's there,
Correct.
anything new would certainly, you have to comply with the
require a
ordinance or get a variance.
Anything new, correct. Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Platt.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Brad Smith, 1313 Laurel Drive. Again, I'm with Lakeview Vice President. And I want to echo Ben's remarks. And I think the problem with the current structure of the ordinance is that it doesn't really take into consideration the existing situation at Lakeview, which has developed over the past 80 or 90 years. I'm not sure how this would work, but with graves along a border of the cemetery that, say, have not been sold, do we have to come in for a variance in order to sell that particular grave in a long line of maybe 100 other graves? That would be unworkable if you have to come in for a variance every time you wanted to sell a grave like that. So the other thing that Ben pointed out is the height of the existing mausoleums. We will need to, in the future, develop more areas where there's mausoleums, and they're going to have to be more than 15 feet high. So we'll be in for variances for that if the ordinance remains the same. And the parking, again, is traditionally people come in, if it could be a big funeral, you could have 100 cars, but they line right up along the roads, and they go out, they come in a line, they go out in a line. It's not a situation where you need a parking lot. Sometimes there'll be a service in a little chapel inside the mausoleum. Generally, we do have some parking areas that seem to be sufficient. So what we want to do, really, is work with you to try and shape this ordinance in a way that works for Lakeview and works for Cinnaminson. And I think it can be done. It's just going to take some time to sit down and discuss it and come up with some solutions. So I support Ben's call to table this tonight and allow us to work with you. We're a big part of the community here. There's 28,000 permanent residents at Lakeview. And and many of their relatives live right here in Cinnaminson. So it's really an important facility. It's important for us at Lakeview. It's important for you and for the people of this town. So please work with us. We'll work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Okay, seeing no one else come forward, may I have a motion to close public comment on ordinance 2022-4?
We have somebody that's,
Oh, I'm sorry, for 2022-4, please come forward, I'm sorry.
Well, I can just ask this question from here, because does this only refer to cemeteries, nothing else?
that is correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, may I have a motion to close public comment on ordinance 2022-4?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to close public comment on ordinance 2022-4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. May I have a second?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Voice vote? Ayes.
Aye.
Aye. Nays, abstentions? Ayes have it. After hearing public comment and concern, I would suggest that committee make a motion to table ordinance 2022-4. Mr. Platt, do I need to do anything further before
No,
presenting a motion?
No, we just have to have that motion.
Okay, I'll make that motion myself. I'd like to make a motion to table ordinance 2022-4. Can I get a second?
Madam Mayor, I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horner. Does this require a voice vote or roll call?
Roll call, that'd be good.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Conda?
Aye.
Mr. Soto?
Aye.
Mr. McGill?
Aye.
Mayor Craybill?
Aye.
Thank you.
I would ask council to provide some written comments to Mr. Schubiger, and we can then discuss it, generally speaking, and see where we can go from there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to ordinance 2022-5, amending, revising, and supplementing Chapter 525 of the General Code of the Township of Cinnaminson entitled Zoning. Mr. Minton?
You don't get paid for ordinances that get tabled, Mr. Mitchell.
There you go. There's the kids' college fund again. Madam Mayor, if you'll indulge me, former Mayor Stahl is here, too. He's the only one that didn't speak, but he should be recognized. So he's the president. So President Stahl is here as well. Mayor, for your consideration tonight, the final Economic Development Committee ordinance is 22-5. It really comes at a request from the zoning department that required us to identify alternate venues to resolve existing complaints. Right now, the zoning board has primary jurisdiction. This ordinance allows municipal court to consider such violations. It also increases penalties to make it more noticeable, and it really attempts to reduce the proliferation of multiple signs on properties as opposed to what was approved during the site plan process. On any given day, we could do a wager as to how many signs are on one establishment or the other, and these pop-up signs, temporary signs, signs in parking lots, advertising where the store may be selling. It really attempts to control that in a more meaningful way, and that's for your consideration this evening. It's just on commercial properties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minton. May I have a motion to open public comment on ordinance 2022-5?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to open public comment on 2022-5.
Thank you, Mr. Conda. I will second the motion. Voice vote, ayes.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Ayes have it. Public comment on ordinance 2022-5 is now open. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing no one come forward, may I have a motion to close public comment on ordinance 2022-5?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to close public comment on ordinance 2022-5.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Voice vote, ayes.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Ayes have it. I will make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-5. May I have a second?
Madam Mayor, I'll second that.
Roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Conda.
Aye.
Mr. Horner.
Aye.
Mr. Mcgill.
Aye.
Mayor Cravo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to roll into the consent agenda. Mr. Schubiger, can you please give us some detail regarding some of the resolutions on tonight's consent agenda?
Sure, Mayor. There are just 3 resolutions on tonight's consent agenda. The first is Resolution 70, which is authorizing a change order and payment for the Wayne Drive Bridge reconstruction project. Our project engineer, Alimo, has deemed this project substantially complete and recommends payment in the amount of $113,103.34. Alimo soon will be providing the township with additional information regarding retainage, other associated issues, and then finally, maintenance guarantees. That will be their final recommendation that should be coming soon. Resolution 71 is authorizing an award of contract to a sole source provider, NITV Federal Services, which is for police department equipment and training. This recommendation comes from Chief Calabrese, and he recommends that the township indeed contract with NITV Federal Services, and it is for Detective Bureau investigative equipment and associated training with that equipment. Since they are the sole provider, it does require a resolution. CFO Edmondson, also our purchasing agent, has recommended that the governing body authorize this award of contract in the amount of $9,995. Resolution 72 is authorizing a refund of taxes for a totally disabled veteran for Block 1004, Lot 2. This recommendation comes from our tax assessor, who has determined that the owner of the property is indeed eligible for this tax benefit. And then finally, Mayor, there is a raffle on the consent agenda for your authorization for the Delanco Youth Sports Association for May 14th. And that concludes my comments on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Schubiger.
Great job.
Okay, we will open up public comment for the consent agenda items only. May I have a motion to open the public comment on the consent agenda items only?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to open public comment on consent agenda items only.
Thank you, Mr. Conda. I'll second. Voice vote. Ayes.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Ayes have it. Public comment on the consent agenda is now open. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Okay, Jermella Shepherd, 215 West Front Street, Palmyra, New Jersey, 08065. President of the Civic Club, asking the question for members who cannot attend. Who lives on the block 1004, Lot 2? Are we allowed to ask that question, the person's name, or not?
No.
Okay, good enough. Next question. how does okay, who would I contact if I knew a disabled veteran? Veterans Administration? And then the township?
If for tax purposes, you could reach out to the tax office.
Oh, just the tax office?
And they would walk you through which documents are required and assist further with that. Mr. Shooter,
Yeah, Ms.
is there any-
Shepherd, if you want to give me a call or, first, and then I can contact the professionals that'll really guide you through the process. 'Cause some
Okay.
of them aren't full-time employees, very good and helpful employees, just not here all day, I might add. But if you call me, give me a heads up, I'll reach out and make sure they contact you. And I can, after the meeting, give you, additional contact information if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd.
Come on down.
Lines 100 per now. On 2022-71, the 9K, I think that's about what it was. Now, will there be yearly, like, maintenance cost and recertification every year for the detectives to use that? And is that included in the first year, or will that be something each year you'll have to
So,
address?
may I?
Yes, please.
Sorry, Mr.
Sorry,
Goins.
I was looking-
Lieutenant Obachowski is here, but I believe that is a one-time purchase that comes with training for 2 detectives, and there are no additional associated costs afterwards. If that's not the case, I'll follow up with you and let you know, but we talked about that, and I don't believe so.
Okay, I was just curious on that part. Thank
Okay,
you.
yep.
Thank you, Mr. Goins. Okay, seeing no one else come forward, may I have a motion to close public comment on the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to close public comment on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Conda. I will second. Voice vote, please. Ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Ayes have it. I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda. May I have a second?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Conda.
Aye.
Mr. Horner.
Aye.
Mr. McGill.
Aye.
Mayor Craybill.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 4th, 2022, and April 4th, 2022 closed?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 4th, 2022, and April 4th, 2022 closed.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Madam Mayor, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Conda.
Aye.
Mr. Horner.
Aye.
Mr. McGill.
Aye.
Mayor Craybill.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, approval of the bills. May I have a motion to approve the bill list?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the bill list.
Okay, I will second the motion. Roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Conda.
Aye.
Mr. Horner.
Aye.
Mr. McGill.
Aye.
And Mr. Seagrass just arrived.
Aye.
Thank you.
Lisa.
And Mayor Craybill.
Aye.
I apologize.
Okay, do we have any comments from our staff or professionals this evening?
Mayor, I have one comment. I just want to reiterate, we bring this up from time to time, and I'm sure Lieutenant Obachowski would agree with me on this comment. A lot of things occur within our community, and our police force is out there. They do a tremendous job, I think, for residents and for everyone here. The community helping is really important, though. So the last few weeks, I've heard on occasion, I'm not sure who to call. I saw something, I heard something, and that's great because we want the community to be involved with just making our community as great as it is. But I can't strong enough. I can't tell you strongly enough that first of all, if it's an emergency, call 911. And if it's not an emergency, but you think something is just not right, you're looking for figuring out, who do I call? The police has a non-emergency number, 829-6666. I should know that by heart, but that's correct, right? 829-6666. I give that number out very often. What's that? That would be 856, thank you, Mr. Platt. 856-829-6666. And I say that with all sincerity, because the police do respond. That number is very helpful to them, and I think it could help us get through some things that, aren't emergencies, but could just make our community even better than it already is. So just want to remind residents of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker.
Do you have, anybody else have any additional
Not
comments?
after that.
No. Okay, we'll go into public comment. May I have a motion to open public comment?
Make a motion, Madam Mayor, to open public comment.
Okay, I will second. Voice vote. Ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Abstention? Ayes have it. Public comment is now open. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Come on down.
I'm getting up here.
Just sit up front. Shorter walk.
I need the expert. Mike Wentz, 100 per hour. So I attended the zoning board meeting on Wednesday about Goodwill. And one of the comments that was throughout is that people had visited other Goodwills, and either they saw stuff still sitting outside or they saw lots of stuff. And I got up and talked about what I saw at different ones. My wife also works in Willenburg part-time at the vets. She took pictures and she attested to that and told them that there was a couch, propane, this and that. And we got a big song and dance that we'll clean it right up, and we do it as soon as every morning. By 8:30, usually everything's there. Well, she took the picture last weekend, and the couch and propane is still in Willenburg. So even though they talked a good game at the meeting, said, hey, we're going to make sure that gets cleaned up. If it's anything like what's still going on at other locations, I don't have too much faith. So I just wanted this council to know that a lot of people did talk about it and weren't happy about the location where it's going to be and how it's directly going to impact the residents, and about the people in the hotel. As they see the bags thrown in there, they're going to come through here and start rummaging. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Goins.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else come forward? Oops.
There we go.
I believe this is the question that I could come back to, remember?
This is.
My question was about the property when it's vacant. And I want to give the example of a property that is vacant in East Riverton on Pear Street. It's vacant and it's been vacant. Now, once everything is done that's legal and you try to find the person and you can't, et cetera, if it comes back to the township and the township has to knock it down or destroy it, right now there is only one house on that property. After it gets knocked down, could someone come in, ask for a waiver, and build two houses on that property? Because it has happened in the past, but in the past, the property, I think it was divided into two homes. But this property is definitely smaller. So who would decide that in the very end? Would it be a variance from the planning board, the zoning board, or what?
Mr. Platt, could you explain to Ms. Shepherd?
I can, thank you for your question. So if you crossed all those rivers of ifs, and the house were demolished, the answer is that anybody can apply for subdivision approval to the planning board. I don't know the dimensions of the property, but if what you're saying is true, they would have a very difficult time justifying the variance to be able to subdivide the property to build two homes on what was formerly one property. But I'm speaking purely hypothetical at this point, but with my knowledge based upon 30 years of being a land use attorney as well. So it would be very difficult if you're saying it is a small property that basically can accommodate one house. It would be very difficult. So that would not be something that this committee would have jurisdiction over, but the planning board would. Again, hypothetically, a lot of ifs, a lot of rivers to cross, but it would not be something that I would stay up at night worrying about.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Ms.
ma'am.
Shepherd.
I
Okay,
just want to also, one other thing, there's something called a density variance. Now, that typically goes before a zoning board, but when it's a minor subdivision, it still remains with the planning board, just in case somebody wanted to be technical about the issue. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Platt.
Thank you.
Okay, I will make a motion to close public comment. May I have a second?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Voice vote, please. Ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Ayes have it. Do we have any comments from committee members tonight?
I have nothing this evening, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you,
Nothing
Mr.
further,
Platt.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Mr. Segrist, do you have anything?
Madam Mayor, I missed,
Did you want to give your liaison report?
I would like to give just a little bit of information.
Please, go right ahead.
Okay. Public Works is going to be hosting Spring Cleanup Day on May 21st from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Public Works facility. Acceptable items for disposal include paints, motor oil, antifreeze electronics, televisions, brush and branches, metal items, automobile and small truck tires, car batteries, and large trash items. As usual, bulk trash is the first week, Wednesday, May 4th, and Thursday, May 5th. Residents are encouraged to call Republic Services if there is any concerns with trash collection. That number is 856-234-4000. There's one more item, and this is business as usual. The Public Works Department is currently working through Section 3 for both brush leaf pickup collection. April is the last month for leaf curbside collection until the fall. However, the Residents Convenience Center, which is open 24/7, located at the Public Works facility, is always open for disposal of leaves and brush. That concludes my report. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Segrist.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. All right, we do have a closed session this evening. Mr. Platt, do you anticipate us taking any official action?
No, and I expect it to last probably approximately 30 minutes.
Okay. May I have a motion for us to go into closed session?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session.
Okay, I will second the motion. Voice vote. Ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Ayes have it.